Dr. Abiy Ahmed, Prime Minister of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, Excellencies, invited guests, I'm very pleased and honored to be here to walk you through the reform that has taken place in the agriculture sector, which is, of course, the most important sector. There are two things that can make my life difficult. The three prolific speakers in the morning raised the bar. Secondly, you all had Ethiopian coffee, for sure. So you are all active. So in this reform, I will walk you through this, a brief background, the reform agendas, and the results of the reform, our focus in the years ahead in the agriculture sector. So, most of you know that agriculture is an important sector for the Ethiopian economy, as 1/3 of our GDP comes from there, and 2/3 of our populations are engaged in agriculture. Its contribution to generate revenue from forex, from export, and an important input to be provided to agricultural industrial parks. In addition, it also helps in terms of providing raw material for manufacturing industry that includes textile and leather. Taking this importance, Ethiopia initiated agricultural transformation and registered successful results. The question is, in order to accelerate the current gains, what do we have in terms of potential? So, in terms of potential, we have agroecologies that are available worldwide, which means we can grow crops, livestock and forest species that can be grown worldwide. And this is a huge natural endowment. Secondly, we have agricultural land estimated to be 38.5 million hectares, of which we have utilized 54%. And the remaining 46% is ready for technology and investment. In addition, we have huge water resources that can be tapped into irrigation. And with irrigation, we can really double, triple our agricultural produce. Ethiopia is also the second populous country in Africa. Of this population, 60% are productive workforces. And these are also important for agricultural transformation. In addition, we have cattle. Comparing us with Africa, we are number one in terms of number, but I will get back to this point in terms of productivity and what we are doing right now. So we have a reasonably huge bee colonies that can be tapped into economy. So taking the importance of agriculture and the huge natural resources we have, previous administrations did what they could. So if we take during the monarchy era, the regime had an intention of modernizing agriculture. And they established 3 agricultural schools, Ambo, Jima, and Haramaya. And graduates from these schools were given the opportunity to access land and credit to establish commercial farms, in addition to the private sector that we had at that time. So the focus of the monarchy era was elite and large-scale producers. This regime underestimated the role of smallholder producer that are contributing a lot to our national GDP. Moving to the Derg regime, That regime did the opposite. Land ownership moved to a state, and properties of the commercial farms were nationalized and put under state farms. So this regime, in terms of agriculture, underestimated the contribution of private sector for our national economy. Moving ahead to EPRDF, land ownership remained the same. State farms were sold back to private sector, again underestimating the role of public investment to our national economy. At that time, food security was a focus, and the thinking was this food security can be offset if we can prioritize on cereals, specifically on productivity. So that was the focus of the EPRDF era. So reviewing the gaps created across these three regimes, the reform government came up with the following departure. So departure number one is who should be the actor in the agriculture sector. So we need public sector, private sector, and people investment in the agricultural development and the agricultural transformation. And by the time the reform government took power, our trade balance, I'm talking about agricultural trade balance, was negative, which means we are claiming that we are agrarian nation. On the other hand, we are importing agricultural commodity. Our import bill was higher than what we sell to the world. So as a result of this, the reform government initiated import substitution. And finally, instead of food security, food sovereignty, where we can control the entire food system, was prioritized, because food security has a supply side risk. On the other side, in terms of our production system, cluster farming was prioritized because 90% of our producers are small-scale farmers. Unless we cluster adjacent lands and treat the big land as a commercial farm, it is very difficult to commercialize. And in order to commercialize, technology and innovation as an input is also critical. Agriculture requires a special type of finance. The commercial banks established in Ethiopia were very much focused on cities and towns and short-term businesses. Agriculture, on the other hand, requires a long-term investment, a long-term finance. So we created a special financial arrangement that I will get back to this point later. Incentives for these actors, the three actors that I cited. Just to give you an example, tax exemption for those who are importing agricultural machineries. That policy alone significantly changed the number of tractors, combiners, and other farm machineries imported, and in return, those machineries increased productivity and reduced post-harvest losses. So, framing these departures into three reform areas is what has been done. So, a policy reform, programmatic reform, and institutional reform. The reform, the economic reform presented by Dr. Eyob, include the sectoral reform. I am taking that part and partitioning into three areas, a policy and programmatic and institutional. In the agricultural rural development policy, we have 10 policy agendas. Of these, 4 are brand new, and 3 are modified from the previous rural development policy, and 3 are taken directly from the previous EPRDF policy. And that is a philosophy of the reform government, We don't start from zero or white paper. We build on existing efforts. On the programmatic side, we have a 10-year development plan and 10 flagship programs, and also new initiatives. One, very much attached to crops for food security. Second, very much attached to nutrition security on the livestock sector. The third one is afforestation, which is meant mainly for environment and sustainability of what we are doing. On the institutional reform, it's about optimizing institutions to be more productive, more efficient, and more effective. And this is not something that we do once and leave it. This is what we do on a yearly basis. And part of the agricultural services went into a one-stop service. We have a replica of Masob in the rural area. We call it one-stop shop. For those of you who know, one-stop shop is meant to provide farmers with all agricultural inputs and the associated advisory services. So when we do this in a very disciplined way, it can take us to agricultural transformation. So the question is, what is agricultural transformation? So it is a process that takes us from subsistence farming towards an industrialized farming, which means where farming is treated as business enterprises. And the main character of this, or the key indicator for this, is a marketable surplus. So when producers sell less than 25%, it's just subsistence. When it goes beyond 75%, we say agriculture is commercialized or transformed. In between 25 and 75 is where agricultural transformation is in progress. So what is the approach we have taken to commercialize agriculture? We have a cluster as an approach which matches very well with Medemer philosophy, where when farmers are together, they create synergy, they complement each other, and they can get better produce. So what are the key issues that we are trying to fix with cluster farming? Land consolidation is an important result, which means we are tackling with land fragmentation. As I said, 90% of our producers are smallholders. It's very difficult to commercialize a small holding. Secondly, adoption of full package. Some farmers use and some don't use. In this case, when we have cluster farmers, all of them use technologies in its full package, not one segment of the technologies or the packages. Aggregation will not be an issue, and farmers will have a bargaining power for better prices. And when you look at the achievements registered so far, cluster farmers got 29% productivity gains and 18% income gains over their non-cluster farmers. And when you see the progress on the number of farmers engaged or subscribing cluster farming and the land put under cluster farming, the growth is 14 times over the last 6 years. We started with about 500,000. We went up 12.8 million hectares in here. So in terms of setup, we have individual farmers. We have cluster farmers that are informal groups, and they need to undergo through these 3 processes. It's like a team building when you have storming, norming, and performing. We have the basic where they try to find out the shared vision. What can we grow together? What can we get if we grow maize in terms of return? So in the intermediate level, they get together. At advanced level, farm operation is very well organized. So when they graduate these 3 stages, they'll be moving to agribusiness companies. And that is what we are working right now. We are working on 2 sides, on the legal framework side as well as on the programmatic side. By the time we have all these things in place in terms of legal framework, these entities are recognized as legal entities, which means they can enter into a contract. They can also access finance in terms of credit. So how are cluster farmers linked with industries? In between the industry and the cluster farmers, we have what we call rural transformation centers. And these centers are meant for aggregation, for cleaning, grading, and handing over the produce to the industries. In addition to the reform done in the policy, programmatic, and institution, the government also allocates huge resources, and this is complementary to achieve agricultural transformation. The rate at which our investment increases in agriculture is very much associated or correlated with the rate at which agriculture grows. So, in agricultural transformation and the initiatives that I cited, we are guided by written documents. We're not putting trial and error. These are very much analyzed and guided by a document that has a baseline and an end line. In between, we have milestones that we can measure to show whether we are making progress or not. So in terms of results of the reform, the policy reform is meant to produce proclamations, regulations, and directives. And at the beginning of our plan, we said 23 new proclamations. We are now at the end of the 5th year. We have 8 new proclamations ratified and 4 in the pipeline, which means we are on top of our plan. And the key point within this proclamation, regulation, directive is 1, the engagement of private sector in everything we do. 2nd, commercializing smallholder farmers that are organized in clusters. On the programmatic side, the agricultural production increased 3-fold. Compared to the baseline, this looks huge. But compared to the resource we have, this is still very much at a lower bar. So how did we achieve 3-fold production within 5-6 years? So the first thing we did, as I said, we have huge land mass, and we doubled the agricultural land, the cultivable land. So 100% gains came from this additional land. And then we put in place irrigations. And irrigation, some farmers that do use rain-fed agriculture, when they produce twice, it doubles their productivity and production. In addition, in some lowland areas, they can also produce 3 times a year. That's the second layer or the second driver achieving these 3-fold gains. The third one is our approach in terms of cluster farming. So all farmers on the 12.8 million hectares are getting 30%, 29% additional production. That is a third factor. The fourth factor is the commitment of the leadership. Our Prime Minister, Dr. Abiy, and his leadership team at the regional state, they really do everything possible to make agriculture achieve its goal. So what are the key components that constitute this threefold production? One is the import substitution. We had these 4 commodities, and we used to spend about $2 billion importing this. And now we have malt barley. We are self-sufficient, and we attracted 2 international malt processing factories, and we have 2 domestic production factories. Wheat, we used to be the 3rd largest wheat producer in Africa, following Egypt and Morocco. Now we are leading wheat producer in Africa. Rice, we are targeting at the end of this calendar year to be self-sufficient. Soya has 2 products, edible oil and the soya cake for animal feed. So in addition to saving from the import, there are thousands of jobs created along these value chains. The topmost you look is the souffle malt factory, and the next one is wheat processing, and the last one is a soya processing. So job creation is another side advantage or another output as a result of import substitution. When we import, we are exporting jobs to other countries. So the second component is a livestock initiative. We call it Yelema Trufat. And the minimum we have in terms of increment over the 5 years is 200%. So what is included in the Yelema Trufat? The red meat, milk, poultry meat, egg, aquaculture, and apiculture. Again, in addition to the volume of production we registered, the job created and the mindset shift of our rural youth, considering agriculture as dignified and fulfilling job, is a huge success. So encouraged by the booming poultry industry, the reform government established a grandparent stock. And this grandparent stock is very rare, not only in Africa, but worldwide. Only 6 countries control the pure lines. So having the grandparent stock increased the supply of day-old chicken. Then it also enabled the regional states to have at least 1 parent stock per region and 1 commercial stock per zone, and producer stock either at the village level or at a household level. The credit in terms of establishing the poultry grandparent and the associated parent stocks, commercial stock and producer stock, goes to our visionary Prime Minister, Dr. Abiy, who can see opportunities at a distance. The 3rd component is afforestation. So afforestation has economic benefit, social benefit, and environmental benefit. In terms of economic benefit, I have taken 2 extreme cases. One, in area where we have no history of exporting avocado. Second, in area where we are known for coffee. So the only thing we did was, with this plantation, the volume of production increased and the value generated from this sector also increased. Soil and water conserved, forest restored. Many, I can say most of Ethiopians participated in this campaign. And we have started creating green jobs. Job creation, as I said, majority of our community in the rural area are engaged in agriculture. We still think agriculture can provide employment opportunity for the rural youth. And engaging rural youth in agriculture has double advantage. One, it's a job creation for the rural youth. Second, the rural youth are educated. So it is very easy for them to use technology and innovation that increase productivity and quality of the produce. So there is a mindset shift considering the rural youth as entrepreneurs, service provider, and agribusiness owners. So when we talk about job creation for rural use, it's not just the production segment, it is the entire value chain that creates job for rural use. And these all exercise are fueled or enhanced by digital agriculture, where Miriam sketched the entire framework. In the agriculture sector, we are establishing an ecosystem that can enhance agriculture and rural transformation, running from an enabler where we have policy and infrastructure, all the way to digital stack or data stack and application or use cases where we have multiple startups. Just to give you an example, something that the agriculture sector in collaboration with the Institute of Artificial Intelligence designing now is a voice-based AI advisory service. So we have a platform called 8028 that has 7 million registered callers. And when somebody calls, AI takes the question and navigates through the database, synthesize a response, and response is channeled to the caller through the platform that we have. The other thing we do is in area which are located remote and have limited access, we are putting digital kiosks. And these digital kiosks are meant for extension and advisory service, for finance and inputs, and market information. In addition, training is also possible through our AgriLearn platform, where those initiatives are compiled in the form of module, and the modules are uploaded onto these devices. Users can access the module, go through the module, take the test, and get certified. And this is something that we are intensifying in the agribusiness companies that we are establishing now. So, summing up, agricultural GDP grew by more than 56%. In addition to the saving we have, the jobs created, the natural resource conserved. So in conclusion, the agriculture sector reform has enabled Ethiopia to register remarkable achievements, consolidating the role of agriculture as a basis or as a foundation for livelihood of millions of Ethiopians. Secondly, to be more productive and more better market-oriented, triggering the rural transformation. Thirdly, to attract additional investment to change the resources we have into wealth. So moving forward, these are the three key focus areas that the sector is prioritizing. One, commercializing smallholder farmers who are organized in cluster through agribusiness companies. And these are the associated facilities for these companies. Second, there is an interface between agricultural transformation and rural transformation. That interface links rural-urban. That interface pulls agricultural transformation to its ability to sell marketable surplus, because in the rural transformation, we're putting in place the infrastructure associated with marketable surplus. The marketable surplus need to be stored. We have storage structures. What is stored need to go to the market or to a processing plant that requires roads and logistics and processing plants. So that connection, that interface is what we are going to begin. We are not completing the agricultural transformation and then moving to rural transformation. We are working on that interface. Digital agriculture, we are enhancing the digital ecosystem for agriculture and rural transformation. That's what I have. Thank you so much for your attention.